Hello and welcome to the 5 Writers 5 Minutes podcast, in which 5 children's authors share their top writing tips. I'm Lian Tanner.
I'm Sarah Armstrong.
I'm Deborah Abela.
I'm Tristan Bancks.
And I'm Zanni Louise.
Today we are talking about editing, and I'm sure a lot of you are going to groan when we say that because some people hate editing. I really like it. And one of the reasons I really like it is because I never get a story right first time. And if I try, I end up kind of paralyzed, like staring at the screen and not daring to write anything because it feels as if there's so much pressure. So what I always aim to do is write it badly and then fix it. So today we're talking about how we might fix it. Sarah, how do you fix your first drafts?
Well, I think about editing or rewriting, as it's sometimes called, as there's big picture stuff and there's little picture stuff. And I always do the big picture stuff first. And the big picture stuff is, the big questions like, what does my character really want? And how can I make it matter even more to them, which is stakes, of course. And is it set in the right place? Could there be more settings? Is each character playing the right role? I think about those big ones, and the little questions are more around just word choice and paragraphs and sort of thing. So the main big questions, I think the main big question I work on is, what does my character want? And sometimes I need to write the first draft to figure that out. I might have a bit of an idea as I'm writing, but I need to write it to really drill down into it. And I'll just do free writing from the point of view of my character. I want blah, 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 blah. I want blah, 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 blah. And I'll just drill down, and I try and find a very concrete form of it, as well as maybe a more abstract or idea form of what they want. So maybe they want belonging, but what does that look like in very practical terms? Does it mean joining that basketball team? Does it mean finding their long lost uncle? Or what does it mean for them? I have to get really, really concrete on that. And then I try and make it matter even more. Like joining the basketball team might matter more because their brother, who's in jail or gone or lost or dead or something, used to be an amazing basketball player, and they want to make their brother proud or kind of do it in their brother's memory. And finding the long lost uncle, maybe that's the only family they have now, that sort of thing. So I try and make it matter more and more. And I'm also thinking about tension. I reckon tension's the thing that makes you turn the page, because you want a question answered. So I'm always thinking about what question is posed for the reader right here. I think about it as little flags in the air, and you've got to have one flag in the air at all the time. And if you've got 5, all the better. So I'm always thinking my little flags in the air, which is a question or a gap in information. So that's sort of how I approach editing first, those very big picture questions. And often it's just a lot of writing on the side of the actual manuscript, not working in the manuscript, and then I can come back in and make changes.
Yeah. Lian, I'm like you. I love editing. In a way, your bulk of your work is kind of done, right? The hard part's done, just getting a story down and on the page. That the editing for me is making that story clearer, stronger, getting rid of anything that's slowing down the pace, getting in the way of the story. Maybe I've written a beautiful description of a lovely forest that goes on for 5 pages, and perhaps we just need 1 or 2 sentences about the beautiful forest, right? And then let's get going into that forest because there is a giant wolf about to attack everyone. So for me, editing is it's taking your work that's already kind of good, right? But you are making it better by taking stuff out. And one thing that I always remember, I've read the book. I know that a lot of us here have read this book called On Writing by Stephen King. And he basically says the second draft of your story should be your first draft minus 10%. So essentially what that means is you are cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. And what I love so much is when I cut things out, because I realize, I've kind of already said that before, so that's going to go. Sometimes when you do cut out those big paragraphs and then you go from this paragraph to that one, it's better.
Yeah.
It's clearer, it's stronger, it gets to the point much more quickly. So for me, editing is literally taking your story and just breathing life into it and making so much better.
Yeah, and people think of editing and writing as 2 separate things, but really in every 5-minute block of writing, I'm editing and writing and editing and writing. Even if it is a first draft, I'm editing those sentences even as I go. In an ideal world, you'd begin at the first sentence and you'd write right through to the end of the book.
Yeah.
And I try to do that in a roundabout way, but some things that you've just written and you just have a little read back of, you can't bear to leave them in your wake. And so you just fix them up so that future you doesn't have to read something as horrendous as that. But I really think these editing and writing all the way through the process occur. And then the exciting part for me is when I feel like the story is readable and I wouldn't feel embarrassed to let another human read it. And I let my editor, Claire de Medici, who's at Penguin Random House, who has helped me with Scartown and Cop and Robber, and she elevates the material from the point where I think it's readable. She helps me she points out all the things that I haven't seen, and I love that bit. I love that part of the editing process more than I like the bit when I'm alone, in a way.
Zanni, how about you?
Oh, for me, I like to think of it like pruning a tree. So you've got your tree and you grow your wild woolly beast of a thing, and you don't really know, what you're looking at some of the time. And then you have to prune it back. So like you're all saying, that 10%, but it's often way more than 10%, isn't it? And you take off all those loose, dead weights of branches and all the rotting fruit. But the great thing about it is that it goes back into the story soil. So it composts all of your future stories. And I really love this picture in my mind because it helps me take risks as a writer, and it helps me be really loose with my first drafts and adventurous and courageous, because I think, well, none of it's going to be wasted. So let's just try this out. Let's just see what's going to happen. And so otherwise I'd be quite precious about it and maybe a bit fearful about the story that I'm developing. So that picture really helps me. And like Sarah, I've got my big picture stuff and then I've got the fine tuning, and I've come to love all of it. I used to hate the idea of editing, whereas now it is one of my favorite bits. And like you said, Tristan, I love that collaboration between the professional editor who can help you see with clear vision what you need to do to your story. And can I just share one really awesome editing tip that I actually got from Deborah Abela? And this is just the best, honestly. So you take a sentence like the car drove down the road, you circle the nouns, circle the verbs, so car and drove, and you replace them with something more specific and more interesting, and not adding extra adjectives or anything, that just more specific, more interesting. And that will just elevate your writing like no tomorrow.
And can you give us an example of that sentence?
Well, I use it in schools all the time, and I remember Deb doing this as well. So you can take the car drove down the road to be something like the Lamborghini rattled down the track, or the truck sped down the highway. It creates such personality and information. You get so much more of a picture just by those more specific words that will definitely heighten the scene.
Yeah. And the idea is to make your words work harder. So not more words. It's so true, Zanni, not more words, but you have to be, writers deliberately choose particular words because they want that mood, they want that picture.
Exactly.
That is such a great tip. And I love, Zanni, what you said about the editing process allows us to be more courageous when we're writing our first draft. I think that's so important. For me, a big part of editing is listening to my internal voice. And that's the internal voice that I have grown from reading so much. And when we read, we learn how a story works. If we read a lot, we learn what other writers do. So I'm actually editing a story at the moment, and I've had this little niggle in the back of my mind that has said, Lian, there's something not working here. And I've been ignoring it. But I've had to listen to it, and I've realized things happen and the characters do funny things, but those things don't push the main story forward. And I think that this is because the main character doesn't really have anything driving him until about halfway through the book, which is too late. So in Spellhound, the pup knows what he wants really early on in the story. He wants to get his parents back because they've been stolen from a dragon. And that's really important. That's really high stakes. And Flax knows what she wants. She wants to get the pup back to the floating forest, because if she doesn't, disaster's going to strike. So that's also really high stakes. And those two wants kind of clash with each other. And that makes other stuff happen, really important stuff. So right now, I'm going back to the beginning of the new book, and I'm trying to work out exactly what's driving the main character and what happens because of it. And that's a really important part of editing. So look, If you hate editing, try to realize how important it is and how it allows you to be so much braver when you're writing your first draft, and learn to have fun with it. Learn that fixing a story, chopping out words, working out what your characters want can be really fun and really interesting.
And really creative as well, because I think that's one of the things that means we don't enjoy it as much. We think it's not creative, but it's very creative.
It's very creative.
Yes.
Yeah. Look, we hope you enjoyed this episode of 5 Writers, 5 Minutes. We're a podcast. We're also a YouTube channel, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.